My name is Ben, and I have, for the last 6 or 7 years, almost exclusively worked in the nonprofit world, and just happened to have spent most of it working on the online side of fundraising. It hasn't been exclusively that, but I wanted to say, why are we working together on this presentation? And part of it being that throughout the different organizations I or we have worked with, myself or through Frontier Consulting, is it's had dramatic results on online fundraising. And just to say that is that by practicing these best practices that we might be going through, I think it's sort of universal that any other organization will benefit from it. And doesn't look like this is visualizing well. Imagine the X being a little bit further up. The style of the presentation is more or less the show and tell and less of a book report. So you might be asking questions to yourself, like broad best practices, no. Experiences I've had, yes. And so almost all of the examples I will give you are probably within the last year and very specific to organizations I've worked for. And oddly enough, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about email and online fundraising is a great example being that perhaps the best organization to do online fundraising well raised most of their money through email. And two of my favorite quotes come from the director of digital analytics for the Obama campaign. And because of the screens, I guess I'll have to read them out for you. Most people have a nearly limitless capacity for email and won't unsubscribe no matter how many they're sent. And raise your hand if that was sort of your modus operandi for sending emails. And more than likely it's the complete opposite, that you're almost paranoid of oversending emails to people. And next, we were so bad at predicting what would win that it only reinforced the need to constantly keep testing. So one of the things this presentation won't have is any tips or tricks for an A/B test that was really successful for me, or what time of day to send an email. The biggest thing is just to have a culture of testing, because there is no such thing as a single best practice. And yet another Google Drive moment. Do you have before we begin, and part of what I'm promising is dramatic results in online fundraising, there is a few caveats. And the first one is you must have a clear fundraising strategy first. So it isn't so much sending more emails and then getting more money, it's having a clear sense of what you're fundraising for and asking people in a way that makes very clear sense. And then secondly, always a sense of urgency. And if you can guess the band that relates to this phrase, bonus points to anyone. All right, no one? Being a person and being a donor are not mutually exclusive. So when you're communicating, another big goal is to, what I do is generally imagine that I am writing a letter to grandma. And so that if I'm writing that letter, it should be very personal. As if it was a handwritten note that I'm sending in the mail, and all amount of formality can go with that. And if I want to send a newsletter, likewise, I'm trying to show the art that I created for my grandma. Not a sort of collage of past experiences that I want to throw at someone. I want to make sure that I'm addressing the person as well as the donor. And for the crowd, if I said dancer, would anyone get the answer? The Killers? Yeah. There we go. One example that's outside of my work, and on these tiny screens, it might not work well, is making sure to have very human communication. My favorite email I've ever received was from HubSpot, who does online marketing exclusively, and I saw the subject line, webinar next week, and I thought, I'm invited to this webinar personally, and because when I opened it, it was, hi Benjamin, and it's a text-based email. Like, what's to indicate for me, who just opened this email, that I was one of tens of thousands of people receiving a very personal invite to a webinar? And it had me for a good minute or two, just wondering if I was personally invited. And so that's just like a concrete example to give you of what it's like to talk in a human language. Is thinking, if I'm going to email this person one-on-one, it should be the same way as if I email through a service provider. Does your website deliver the goods is the question. And again, remembering that as good as you can be about sending people from opening your email to clicking on it, we won't be having great fundraising success if it's not easy to donate online. And another question on this screen. Do you invite your donors inside? And then one of the things about that communication is making sure that it feels very inclusive and participative. And that's just to say that most people can't work for your organization, they can't volunteer for it, but almost everyone can donate some amount. And if someone has an email address and they're subscribed to your list, more than likely they have access to the internet, and by clicking to donate, that's a very low barrier. So just remembering that one way to engage someone online is through fundraising and the communication of basically allowing people to participate in a very low barrier manner. And it's a lot more to actually join the staff. And so I've got a couple of checklists here. Is signs you're ready to take off. And the first one being, have you signed up for a Google grant? And if you don't know what that is, or alternatively, if you're an expert at applying for Google grants, that would be a great topic if anyone wants to talk about Google AdWords as a nonprofit, because it's amazing. If you have the Google grant, you're eligible for around $10,000 per month in free advertising, which translates to about 200 visitors per day. And those people won't be immediately becoming donors, but if the goal of the website is to get them to sign up to become an email subscriber, and then your goal of your email list is to get them to donate. So just think about a little bit farther down the road. Someone who visits via a Google AdWord click is going to be a donor one day. And one thing we Victorians tend to rarely think about is best practices for hosting. The amount of times that I've come into a nonprofit and they talk about the company down the street that's hosting their website, or the computer in the basement, then I wonder at the ability for a donor to be patient. And an organization rarely thinks on behalf of someone who is online, like themselves, that wants to spend 1 to 2 seconds per web page. And it might be a great savings in the 90s and the early 2000s, but like high-end hosting nowadays is $5 to $10 a month. And so when you think about that, you could actually speed up the experience for someone who is generously giving their money. Think about hosting. Now, one example of being sort of at a best practice is, are you doing A/B testing? Do you know what a heat map is, or a scroll map? And is your sign up and donation form compatible with other services that you're using, like your email service provider? And we'll get to that a little bit more later. And lastly, another best practice, great confirmation emails and autoresponders, which we'll get into a little bit later as well. Yeah, my son, showing him off. Doesn't he look like me? Eh? So, getting started. So you might be an organization that is like, hey Ben, we're doing all the best practices, thank you for validating everything that we're doing right now. Or you could be on the other end, and you're like, what do we do to begin? What does birth look like for a nonprofit doing email marketing? Well, the first thing is to set your email address. One of the things you shouldn't do is make it your own, because more than likely you won't always work for that organization. And when you start to blast out emails, people trust the email address that they're being sent to. So I suggest having email at, contact at, mail at, whatever you want, so long as it's dedicated to email marketing. And then related to that is find your name. Is it the executive director, or is it the organization's name? And that's one early testing, and once you've decided, don't ever change it, is sort of my advice. And really that's part of the persona of your fundraising strategy. Like, is it Ben who's trying to call together hundreds of people to support me? Or is it more or less an institution that's inviting people in to work for the cause?
Ben, could you hug the mic a little bit more?
You bet.
Thanks.
Yeah. The next thing is, and it's just a personal request, is please pay for email credits. Like, I know MailChimp and Constant Contact offer a free alternative that has their brand on it, but it costs between 1 and 2 cents per email to send out. And so, even as a personal offer, if you're getting into using MailChimp and you're like, Ben, I don't want to pay for those email credits, can you sponsor me for 1 cent per email? Yes, please just pay the money or get someone to have it as their form of engagement. And the last thing is to make sure it's connected to Google Analytics. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail later. Now, this is for 2 slides. I will make a very judgmental stance on 2 different organizations. One of them is Canada Helps. So I do believe that Canada is a great organization as a country, but I don't believe that a nonprofit who is facilitating donations is actually that helpful for you. And I'll say this with one example. How many people use Canada Helps every week for spending? All right, we got nothing if you're not looking around. How many people use PayPal, perhaps on a weekly basis? All right, we got 3 or 4. How many people use their credit card on a weekly basis? So if we use the language around credit card, which might be all 3 vehicles, or you're actually using the same piece of plastic, but one of the things you've added to your communication with donors is a language that they might not be familiar with, but we in the nonprofit world are almost too familiar with. And then nextly, you might not be as much of a hater as I am, but honestly, without going into too much detail, there is vast differences between MailChimp and Constant Contact. And it will save you time, save anyone who's helping you time. It'll be visually more outstanding. And so that's just more opinion time. Another Google Drive moment, apparently, is how to grow your list is almost always the starter question. And biggest thing, sadly enough, is through direct mail. And so here's a way to think about why people do mail. It's to acquire emails. Every time a new donor arrives via a direct mail campaign that you've sent out to the community, I would gather perhaps 25% of those people are also giving you their email address, joining the email program, and then having a better life from there. Next, of course, there's a form on the website, making sure that when you go to the home page that people are signing up there. And then as well, if while I'm donating, I'm not given the option to sign up for the email list, that's a major missed opportunity. And I'm not afraid to say the best practice is to have it checked off by default. A good comparable is organ donor rates in different countries. If it's an opt-out versus an opt-in, it makes an incredible difference. And lastly, though I am not in the advocacy-based world, it is clearly a big strategy that when someone is filling in an online form to advocate for something, it is them also joining the email list to later be asked for money. Oh, and the next slide is incredibly embarrassing. Make clear the path to donate now. Never ever make a presentation in Google Drive. And that part of it is to say, make sure things, like it's a care for aesthetics and visual design, because when you clutter things, and this is often a weakness of a newsletter, it's very difficult to understand what you are asking of the user, and basically make it painfully obvious. And speaking of painful, well, honestly, this looks fantastic in Google Drive. One of the advantages of the online world that is very different than direct mail is that you might have a campaign for this upcoming Thanksgiving, and you mail everyone in the room, and then you take their money, and then you wait a couple months, and then you ask them for money again. One of the things that is prohibitively expensive is filming the day, and then sending them a DVD of the experience, whether they donated or not. One of the things you can do in the online world is film it, post it on Vimeo or YouTube, and then send it to the entire list of saying, thanks to you, this is what actually happened. Your money, which was sort of an abstract concept of you funneling it through a website, was manifested in this event that actually happened. Whether you donated or not, which is one of the best parts, because it doesn't cost you more, maybe 1 penny per email, to send it to everyone whether they donated it. And so it gives that opportunity for people to think, hey, this actually happened. They asked me for money, something amazing happened, and next time I want to participate through giving. And so again, rich HTML is one of the great advantages of the internet that is not in the direct mail world. And again, to the low cost of sending emails. find any excuse you can to email someone. And one of the big things is autoresponders, or in the marketing world called drip campaigns. So if someone signs up for your email list, email them to say thank you. Here's a copy of our latest newsletter. Or one of my favorites is you schedule the last email campaign that you've sent out to go to people who have signed up after it went out. So in the fundraising world, someone is like most primed when they've just joined or if they've just donated. So having an autoresponder for people who just missed your latest e-blast, instead of waiting for them to hit the next one you're ready to send, is another great strategy. And so when I sign up for an email, when I become a donor, remember that a confirmation email technically can be part of your email program. And yeah. All right, case study time. So a year ago, would have told you, if you want to make money, have a short, concise email asking for money. If you want to change lives and make people think in a different way, you can write a long newsletter. You can't achieve both. So until I started testing it. And one of the tests was, okay, I send people an email and ask them to go to a website to download a PDF so they can read it on their computer. Like this doesn't feel very natural. If I mailed someone a newsletter, they're able to feel the pages and absorb it. But that same format kind of sucks for the web. So what if it was web first? And what if it was in, again, that more human language? And so what we did was designed a landing page that was essentially a shortened version of the newsletter, and then invited people to come read the latest issue of this newsletter. And it looked completely different. As you can see, that's a sort of custom landing page. And before, and then this is an example from Union Gospel Mission in Vancouver, like a good email raises between $30,000 and $50,000. So $800 was a crime. Like, don't even bother. And when it changed to consistently being $8,000, it validated a lot of those things. That donors are reading this and engaging, but it's in a format that allows them to quickly translate into everlasting joy and donating. And so remember that if you're getting people to go and download a PDF, like how do they translate that to going back to your website and making a gift? And if you didn't know at all what a heat map was, this is an example. And funny enough, you know when you make a web banner and you put a button in it, but the whole thing technically is the button, it has a huge effect, actually, of having that Donate Now button within an image. So this is the second case study, and the whole concept around here is that good fundraising is time-bound. So homelessness might last forever, but we're having this major event. That's why you need to rush in your gift. And it also balances the need between one donor and the assurance of a community of support. So this is to say that there was a generous donor, a group of donors, that are pledging their gift against your gift. So you might feel that your $50 or $100 really doesn't add up, but we're all pulling it together, and there's a defined time period. And this was a campaign that stretched UGM's fundraising records to our one email raised $85,000 from this. And again, a good email was $30,000. So it was a great day when we discovered that a match campaign could be so successful.
Ben, before you move on, can you talk a little bit about the dots and what they mean?
Yeah, without going into too much time, there's a couple ways to visualize specifically where people click. As much as I love Google Analytics, I don't think like a robot. And contrary to what some people who work with me might think. And so when you're actually visualizing a page, it's a lot better to, instead of have the most popular page to go to is about, then this, and 32% of the people click that, it's profoundly different to know that people got to the donate page by touching that specific spot. And when there's more and more and more clicks, it's a heat map. It's on fire, right? And so a couple clicks on the same spot. You can see a couple more might be here, and that's why it's very specific to where someone clicked on the page, and it's much more informative. It's one of the greatest ways to learn about an organization ahead of changing their website.
Thank you.
Not a problem. This was actually featured on global TV, and it's so easy. If you're a techie, you'll know that a little tiny bit of JavaScript at UGM. A lot of the fundraising is around meals. And so we created this form, which was a bit controversial in the organization because we made it about you and not about the people you're helping, because I really wanted to point out the significant tax benefit that people receive even if they're donating a small amount. So we sent an e-blast and we told people enter the amount. And once they did, they got to see that they were helping 10 people and they were getting a tax credit back of $20. And they hit donate today. That number went into the donate page and they just fired through and made their gift. And one of the things is teach people a little bit and it can have a big effect. And not just thinking about having a great email, but having new opportunities for people to donate. And yeah, so big fan of baseball. Keeping score like a pro. So one of the biggest things for me is just measuring everything, as you've seen with the heat map, and how you keep score of everything is how you grow. And so here's a basic for me, and very tech challenge day at Techtoria. Drawing people in, whether paid or via a Google grant, is important. I've rarely found it turn into donations instantly. And that's to say that I can't advertise to someone and then they go to our website and then they're overwhelmed with the desire to give and then they immediately do so. What I have found is that people can consistently sign up for email updates if you do it well. So step one, using Google AdWords, Facebook, or StumbleUpon. Particularly if you're in the advocacy world, StumbleUpon is quite successful. Have it very obvious for people to sign up for email updates, and then track that. And once you're tracking that, even in things like Google Analytics, is the ability to pay cost per conversion. So a conversion being someone signed up for the email, and I'm able to pay according to how many people are signing up. Now I wanted to avoid stats like this because it varies so widely. But where I wanted to pare down this conversation around open rates, click rates, that sort of thing, is you might still be hesitant about over-emailing your audience. You might be like, I respect their inbox, I get over 100 per day, I'd be so upset if I had one more per month. And so to think of it this way is that you're trying to fundraise, and I use a very small number of around 200. And how many people are actually, A, reading the email? So you send it out to 200, 60 people open it. Those 60 people, what is an open, right? You open it, pass, next, mark as read. 10 people out of that 200, maybe they click. They click, they spend a couple seconds on the website, and they go, I'll go back to whatever I did, and then 3 people donate. So remembering that, like, those are rough stats for, and the last is the other group of people are those who are out over the summer break and you got a out of office bounce, or they've moved on to another job, so it's a hard bounce, they've unsubscribed, or their way of not reading your email is to mark it as spam. So really, of that 200, you're looking at 3 people taking action, and that's part of the reason why we keep emailing, is that 3 people at a time are taking action. And further down the measurement note, I am a very big fan of Salesforce.
So, I mean, do you believe that no amount is too much? I mean,
well, I'm only following the
emails
quote.
And they email me, like, I don't know, many times a week. I find it super annoying, and I never respond.
Yeah, well, and partly people filter themselves out. I have a belief that if someone signs up and then they start receiving too many emails, if they don't take the action to unsubscribe right away, they've sort of subconsciously told themselves that they'll never take that action. And so it's sort of like you just keep getting more and more emails, I'll deal with it tomorrow, and then it just becomes a behavior that you don't ever unsubscribe. The other side of it is like we rarely actually tally up how many emails we're receiving from nonprofits. So you don't sit down at the end of the year, you know, how many emails did Plan Canada send me, and like pull it up in Gmail and write them a nasty email that they sent 27 emails to you, right? And specifically if you're away on summer break one day, you just skip it one time, we're actually very bad at in bulk, measuring how many emails we've received from people. And so it's just remembering that you just catch people at bad times a lot of the time, and frequency is one way to sort of compensate for their timing. But there is overkill. You know, the Obama campaign can be a bad example because they're pushing every 4 years, whereas you might be going Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas. So like remembering the sustainability of the list, I've rarely seen unsubscribes ever really change from email to email is one thing. So you can have 4 in a month and 1 in a month, and it tends to stick at around 0.5% no matter what. Salesforce is great because as a database, it works well with others, as does MailChimp, as does Google Analytics, and that's part of the reason why I'd be so biased to something like MailChimp over Constant Contact. Again, account integrations mean that you know exactly how much money is raised from individual emails, and I can't underscore how important that is. Otherwise, another way to do it, and you can't do this with Canada Helps, is to have a different landing page for a different email. So you could tell the gift processing coordinator at Razor's Edge, that's using Razor's Edge, that all the donations from this form are associated with that email. Or if you just want to make proof that your email program is successful, it's just one way to divvy off the resources that are pouring into your website to say this was specifically driven through email, not just people walking into the website and donating. And just to show you my life, this is a spreadsheet I've been keeping, it doesn't show you the beginning, since September of 2009. And I'm really glad I did it. Not that without MailChimp I could actually retroactively do it, but I've recorded every email that's been sent out, the open rate, the click rate, the revenue, the number of transactions, so that each year, till 2013, I can take a look and be like, yeah, that email has successively improved or it's been stagnant, because one of the great advantages of any fundraising program is it tends to repeat on an annual cycle. Because if your December e-blast did really well, you know exactly what you're doing next December. And time is your ally in that sense. And contrary to most things with technology, email, as that first slide showed, it's as retro as it can be. Like, email is not new, social media is, but email hasn't really changed fundamentally since I've been using it in the mid-2000s. Now, despite our tech challenges, I think we're doing good for time. But we are going to have some, this is a big shame. There are some amazing photos of my kids that I was going to work into this presentation. So just imagine this beautiful 4-year-old daughter and the 10-month-old son you saw. Some things that I'm going to suggest are based on my personal emotional experience of having to send out e-blasts to tens of thousands of people. And I know it's a common feeling, is that it's incredibly stressful. The first time you send out an email blast to tens of thousands of people, I think I was shaking. It's like, what if there's something wrong? You can't undo it. You can't like jump and grab the mail and like fix something. It just goes. And then people point out the mistakes that might have happened. And it really honestly doesn't change from a few hundred to, I've been involved with one that had 400,000 people going out. So, if you get the shakes around 300, it's the same feeling. However, have some fun, explore new horizons. There is a benefit to that annual program that you can just be doing the same thing every year and it'll just churn out more money as long as you're bringing in more email addresses. But I have benefited greatly from testing those new horizons. Like, this isn't working, how can we rechange it? And this was a photo of my son putting his soup into his face. And part of it is just to say it's okay to make mistakes. And it's rarely noticed, right? You get an e-blast, how often are you like, hey, what's the spelling of this word? Or, what day did they say that I have to return my gifts by? And especially, the more emails you send, it just kind of gets buried in your own institutional memory and not in your donors. One great example, just to show you, I didn't want to use any of my own, in this case, is that I got this email, I think in the beginning of this week, and the subject line reads, "The Daily Stat." I love HBR. Homes in formerly bombed out areas of Rotterdam now command higher prices. Oh, that's interesting. Open it up. Car density on China's road rivals that of Los Angeles. I don't see how these connect. Read the body. Well, clearly, someone made a big mistake on subject line versus actual content. And if your organization is a bigger nonprofit than the Harvard Business Review, I would And then, like, the biggest thing to think too is it's not like someone lost their job because of that. You know, like, how many of their hundreds of thousands of subscribers even notice that? People, just imagine a 4-year-old child filled with joy, help people see the joy of giving. And I do have one example of that. It's like another reason for you to bring that donation system in-house is that you can control the whole experience. When you give me an email confirmation, it better not be, here is a copy of your bill. Here is a statement from your invoice of your charitable giving. It should be, thank you so much for donating to us. Welcome to the team. This is your form of participating, and you are helping these people who we are serving. And if you're not able to master that whole experience, the specific emails really won't matter that much. And so that's my presentation, and we'll turn it over to the artsy Q&A over here.